My name is Michael Wilds. I practice law in New York, and I've developed a reputation in the international child abduction arena, where I represent these parents without a fee. I've been working these cases since about 1994. For the first 3 or 4 years of my legal experience, I was a federal prosecutor in New York, and then I joined my dad's practice, where we exclusively practice immigration international law. Some parents happened their way into our office. Our hearts went out to them, and I ended up taking on many cases. There is no defined term of international parental abduction. It's a practical experience, unfortunately, for more than 11,000 American citizens since the 1970s who've lost their children to other custodial spouses or guardians who one day, whether they had a court order from an American court or not, turned and learned that their child was taken by a spouse, by a guardian, by a friend, or a lover. I don't know whether or not you would consider it child abuse. The fact is that many parental abductors are capable of abuse, and if taken mostly to Middle Eastern countries, there have been strong allegations of abuse in those countries. The fact is that this is a form of terrorism on the parent itself, because it devastates their whole life. They have no government, no police authority, or no mechanism by which to react, other than being told, "We will visit your child overseas and see that they are well." Parents are told when their children are first kidnapped that they can request a welfare and whereabouts visit to see that their child is okay. The State Department will offer to get you an attorney and to visit the child. Mind you, this is the same State Department that negotiates tremendous commercial deals and military installations on behalf of the United States government. It's unconscionable to me that the State Department or any state, local, or federal authority hasn't been set up in such a way to be more of an advocate for the parents, to be more of a representative. I represent these parents without a fee. There aren't too many attorneys in the United States that even know how to maneuver around immigration, family law. There are just so many different controls and authorities to deal with. These parents are really left out on the cold on their own. There are several nonprofit organizations that are recovering children right now, and thankfully they are growing, and the momentum by parents and people who are advocating on their behalf is very strong. The problem is that more children are being taken than we have people who are advocating for their return. And it's unconscionable to me that our State Department has not heeded the call, and that our elected officials in Congress has not scheduled hearings to hear about these tragedies. These American children are young American citizens just like you and I are, and the fact is that they have been a victim of a crime. Their parent is not a parent, but is a criminal, no different than a kidnapper that takes a child from one state to the other or absconds with a child and spirits him away to another territory. We don't know whether or not that parent is treating the child appropriately or whether or not that parent will ever see their child ever again. Many courts of law in the United States have already defined that custody should vest with one parent or the other. When a non-custodial parent absconds with a child and spirits him away to another country, that is not only against the law, but it might be against the best interest of the child. Most likely there was a finding by the court that there was something wrong with the parent, that they should not have custody in the first place. There could be criminality, there could be drug abuse, all sorts of problems that now will be part of this child's life because of a criminal act that the parent took upon his own, and our government must protect them. The government has a children's issues desk due in part The government has a children's issues desk due in part because of a client that I represented. But all they do is provide a list of attorneys and a welfare and whereabouts visit for parents to go make sure that their child still have a pulse and is alive. That is not nearly enough. You have to understand that these parents go through hell. Often they come home at night to find out that a story that their husband or wife told them was a lie. Then they run right for the bureau where they keep the passports and they see that those are missing. And then what do? Do they call the FBI? Do they call the state and local police? There is no system in place. And then they turn to the state and local police authorities and they're told, we can't issue a warrant because we don't know if the crime occurred in our territory. Or the FBI is unwilling to prosecute, or the U.S. Attorney's Office for that district doesn't have a mandate where they take the new laws seriously enough. We've had occasions where we've actually retrieved children and the kidnapper has returned to U.S. soil and the government refuses to prosecute, or they refuse to put warrants in place preventing the parent from returning to U.S. soil. The Hague Treaty is a procedural device by which parents could try to get their children back to the child's last habitual residence. It is not a substantive custody device, but a procedural mechanism to barter the return of stolen children. Only 53 countries have signed to it, and many people feel that it is totally ineffective. Most countries have, you want me to pause so that you can take little splices?
Yeah, you can pause it. We can still splice it regardless
Okay.
of whether you pause it now.
Most successful covert recoveries have been to Hague countries, letting you know, in fact, that the Hague is not effective. However, most child abductions are to non-ratified countries, that are countries that haven't signed the Hague. Only one country in the Middle East has signed the Hague, Israel. Right now, Canada and Lebanon are involved in bilateral treaties, and we hope that others will follow suit. Simply put, the Hague Convention is an agreement between two nations that we agree to return children to the last place they lived for a period of time. There are many exceptions to the rule, and there are very few countries that have signed the Hague, and that is a serious problem. The Hague Treaty, the Hague Convention, is a treaty between two nations, of which so far only 53 countries have signed, basically saying that we will return children to the last place that they lived. The United States has signed the Hague, and it was due in parcel because of a client that I represented, who unfortunately still does not have her children back. A parent abducts for all sorts of reasons. We've seen that the rooting of a parent's intention to abduct, even on family trips when they go home to visit relatives or they celebrate family vacations. You don't know what will set off an abduction, but it doesn't take much. And parents in cross-cultural relationships must evaluate their vulnerability on a regular basis. I've spoken with abductors. They love their children. Sometimes they're motivated by religion or hatred of the other parent. But parents in cross-cultural relationships have to evaluate their vulnerability and see whether or not they themselves could be subject to a child abduction. Because there is very little law out there, many parents have resorted to re-abduct or recover their children and have shouldered tremendous costs. Both financially, it could number in the hundreds of thousands of dollars on their own, or legally, parents subject themselves to prosecution, if not sanction of death, if they're caught trying to retrieve their own child on foreign soil. I do this work pro bono without a fee. I've developed a reputation in the field. My name is not on the big political map. I've testified in Congress on other issues related to immigration law, but not on this subject. The fact is that I'm not out there as well as other people are in family arenas. Yet family attorneys are inadequate when you deal with immigration controls and major international legal issues. Parents whose children are kidnapped have very little recourse but to have to find a way themselves. They have to hire lawyers, often learn through other parents who have paved the way in the past what to do and how to react. Parents whose children have been kidnapped have to spend enormous amounts of sums of their own monies to retrieve their kids. Sometimes parents pay hundreds of thousands of dollars and they never see their child again. And there are mercenaries and people out there that are willing to take their money. Some are legit, some aren't. The fact remains that the government does not provide you with any resources or any system other than giving you a website and some good shoulder to listen to, but that's all. The fact remains that there is no system in place when a child is kidnapped in the United States. You don't call the FBI and then all of a sudden 4 agents show up and they tell you what to do. You have to go call your own lawyer, find a lawyer, get your own warrants in place, use tremendous sums of money, whether they're using for mercenaries to extract the kids or have private investigators or lawyers hired in other countries. Often years go by before you will get any tidbit of information, and all you might learn is that your child was married by another arranged marriage in another circumstance. The State Department will give you a shoulder, but that's all. If I had a paintbrush and I was painting the political or the legal landscape in this case, I would do it, number one, in a compassionate way. These are American children, no different in their citizenship than you or I. The fact remains, ultimately, Congress needs to put legislation